beso, el beso, el beso en
Whether it's sunrise or sunset or in broad daylight, Salamanca is the most beautiful city in Spain. And from here, the EuroVelo 1 leads over mountains and endless plateaus to the Costa de Luz, the Spanish Atlantic coast. Across the Portuguese border, the route then leads to the extreme southwestern point of Europe, the Cabo de São Vicente, near Sagres. And this is the geographical mirror image of the North Cape, so to speak. Until a few years ago, this was also the final destination of EuroVelo 1. But in the meantime, the cycle path has been extended to encompass the entire Portuguese west coast. The Portuguese are great Europhiles, and I shall say nothing against them. But the transcendent conclusion of the EuroVelo 1 is nevertheless the sunset over the Cabo de São Vicente. The cycle routes in Portugal and Spain are also transcendent. As in Ireland, they exist for the most part only on paper, or rather only on websites. According to the latest EuroVelo internet information, the routes in Spain and the Algarve are mostly classified in the second highest category, developed route with EuroVelo signs. The second part of the statement is true. Signposts can be found from time to time. I therefore construct my cycle route out of necessity from three sources: the EuroVelo 1 pages in the internet, the cycling routes between the individual places suggested by Google Maps, and the stage description published by Annette and Olaf Birgelen in the Internet Tour Guide. It will probably take some time before a real cycling route like Vélodyssée is created here. About 50 or 60 years. Well, no se ganó Zamora en una hora. And Zamora is also my first destination after leaving the Camino. The first stage takes me on a straight country road across a wide plateau from Formista to Palencia. To escape the monotony, I cycle up to the Castillo de Mozón de Campos. A bridge dating back to Roman times leads to the old town of Palencia. The town has several important church buildings from the Middle Ages. For example, the Iglesia de San Miguel, where, according to legend, the wedding of El Cid took place. The large Gothic cathedral of San Antolin has a relatively unadorned exterior, but its interior is all the more splendidly decorated and has a crypt from the Visigothic period. From Palencia, I don't take the official EuroVelo route via Valladolid and Tordesillas to Zamora, but follow the Birgelen's tour guide. It suggests the more remote route via the small towns of Medina de Rio Seco and Villalpando. This route partly leads along dedicated cycle paths, often along canals, but also on former railway lines. The El Camino Natural via Verde del Tren Secundario de Castilla leads out of Palencia. A little later, I come across the cycle path along the Canal de Castilla. I had already been along this canal in Fromista. However, both the cycle paths and the small country roads are of quite uneven quality. The road connection between Medina de Rio Seco and Villalpando is a good example of this. I am a little surprised that there are almost no cars on it, but the mystery is solved when I cycle across the border to the Provincia de Zamora. Here, the surfaced road, which has almost the quality of a German federal road, turns almost seamlessly into a dirt track that is only suitable for mountain bikes. I suspect that the whole thing shows the good use of EU funds. Nearby, I also have my second flat tire. It's on the front wheel, where I only have green guard and not blue guard, and it's quickly repaired. 2 flat tires over a distance of 8,000 kilometers, that is really okay. Medina de Rio Seco and Villalpando are towns off the main tourist routes, but worth seeing. Medina used to be a prosperous trading hub and is known for its covered arcades. Villalpando has a particularly well-preserved town gate from the High Middle Ages and a Mudéjar-style church. Even more splendid is Zamora, which is not far from the Portuguese border on the upper reaches of the Douro, the river on whose banks the famous port wine is grown in Portugal. Zamora's old town, which is well worth seeing, is situated on a hill from which one looks down on the river and the Puente de Piedra. The old town of Zamora is also known as the Romanesque Museum because an unusually large number of churches in this style have been preserved. These include the Cathedral of San Salvador, the Iglesia de la Magdalena, and the Iglesia de Santa Maria la Nueva. To Salamanca, the route again goes over a wide plateau. Almost without a transition, I suddenly find myself in the most beautiful city in Spain, pushing my bike across the most beautiful plaza in Spain. The city, with its magnificent white sandstone buildings, dates back to a pre-Roman settlement. In Roman times, its name was Helmantia, and the Puente Romana across the Rio Tormes is a reminder of this. Salamanca was a border town with the Moorish territories for a long time and only developed into an important intellectual center in Europe in the early modern period. In the University of Salamanca, Columbus had to defend his ideas during a geographical colloquium. The central buildings of the university and the two merged cathedrals, the old and the new, form the heart of Salamanca. Construction of the old cathedral started in 1150 and it is characterized by the Romanesque and Gothic styles. From 1513 onwards, construction of the new cathedral began to the north of the old one. It took more than 200 years to complete it. The bell tower and dome were built in the Renaissance and Baroque style. With around 40,000 students, Salamanca is a very young and lively city. This can be observed at any time of day or night, because studying in Spain seems to consist mainly of eating, drinking and hanging out together. In this respect, the soul of Salamanca is also the beautiful and impressively large market square, where these three basic activities are pursued at all times. EuroVelo 1 does not reach its highest point somewhere in Norway, Scotland or the Pyrenees, but between Salamanca and Béjar. I cycle on small side roads over endless rolling plateaus. Rarely do I encounter cars or one of the Spanish racing cyclists. 99% of them are men. I wonder if that says something about this form of sporting exercise. It is just 70 kilometers to my destination for the day, Valdefuentes de San Vicente. Shortly before Frades de la Sierra, I passed the highest point of the EuroVelo 1 with an altitude of 1079 meters. But since I started in Salamanca with an altitude of 800 meters, this is not a great deal. Fortunately, it doesn't get so hot anymore, because most of the time I ride through open terrain. Mainly it consists of extensive pastureland, which in Spain is called dehesa. Shortly before I reach Valdefuentes, I pass a large granite quarry. In the rather remote village of Valdefuentes, I spent the night in a casa rural. I can't get a dinner anywhere, but I am offered a cultural event. The focus is, how could it be otherwise in Spain, on flamenco.
El moreno aparece, cruza la puerta pisando firme. Baila, el moreno ríe, el moreno la ventorea. Yo estoy rezando por él, culpa sobre la arena del redondel. Francisco Alegre. Así
next day I set off early. I have the Sierra de Bejar clearly in front of me and I know I have to get over it. The Sierra de Bejar is a part of a larger mountain range that runs through the center of the Iberian Peninsula and is usually referred to in English geography as the Central System. I cycle via the small town of Bejar, which is situated on a 959 meters high mountain top. The route is not too steep and the landscape is beautiful. I follow a little country road with hardly any traffic, which leads up the valley of the Rio Serpe de Hombre. In Bejar, I come upon a wonderful cycle path, perhaps the most beautiful I encountered in all of Spain. The Via Verde de la Plata leads from the old railway station of Bejar down to Aldeanova del Camino and then on to the old Roman town of Ciudad Romana de Caparra. The first part of the route, which is in very good condition, is always slightly downhill and offers a wonderful view of the valley and the Rio de Baños, which has been dammed here to form a wide reservoir. The second part of the route to the Ciudad Romana is still in semi-finished state, but it is already usable, bypassing a few prohibition signs. Since I cycle about 100 kilometers on this day, and the Spanish are not known for the long opening hours of their museums, the actual excavation of the Ciudad Romana de Caparra is already closed when I finally arrive there. But the tetrapylon is freely accessible. It is not quite as beautiful as the one in Palmyra, but I have it all to myself. And to celebrate my arrival, I cycle down to the Roman bridge over the Rio Ambos. Caparra received its town charter in 74 AD and was a major Roman city on the Via de la Plata. The Silver Road, which ran between Seville and Astorga, was an important, well-developed trade route in Roman times. The Phoenicians probably already used this route. The road was mainly used to transport gold, which was extracted near Asturica Augusta. In the late Middle Ages, the Via de la Plata became part of the Camino de Santiago. Pilgrims from the south of Spain took it. They started either on the Mozarabic Way of St. James, which begins in Granada, or in Seville. From Caparra, I cycle on via Cacabozzo, where I spent the night, to Plasencia. This town was also an important Roman base on the Silver Road. In Plasencia, I deviate from the EuroVelo 1 route again. I don't choose the direct route to Caceres, but cycle on small country roads in the direction of Torrejon del Rubio. This leads me through the middle of the Monfragüe National Park. It is a hilly and a sweety route, but the impressive landscape is worth the effort. The national park is an important bird sanctuary. It is home to the largest population of the black vulture in Europe. It is also home to golden eagles, griffon vultures and black storks, as well as many other rare species. The Tajo flows through the middle of the area. The same river flows as Tejo into the Atlantic near Lisbon. It is dammed here and forms several large reservoirs. The next day I cycle from Torreón del Rubio to Caceres. On the way I passed the small town of Monroy and the deeply incised valley of the Rio Almonte. Caceres also goes back to a Roman fortress, Castra Cecilia, and the old town was declared a World Heritage Site in 1986. Walking through the winding streets and past the churches and noble palaces, one feels transported back 500 years to the late Middle Ages. It is a pity that I cannot stay for 2 days as planned. I have to leave for Merida the next day. It's a 70-kilometer drive on a dead straight and largely flat federal road, the N630. Cars are encountered once every 5 minutes. That's not surprising, since the motorway runs 20 meters away from this road. Therefore, if flying saucers land on the motorway, traffic need not fear any interruptions. Merida is the capital of the autonomous region of Extremadura and one of the most interesting cities in Spain. Many antiquities from Roman times have been preserved here, which is why Merida has been included in the World Heritage List. In Roman times, the city was called Emerita Augusta and was the capital of the province of Lusitania. The large buildings that have been preserved are impressive. They include the Roman bridges over the Guadana and Albaregas rivers and the excellently preserved amphitheatre. Furthermore, the Temple of Diana remains of the Forum and the Mithraeum, as well as the Acueducto de los Milagros, today a popular nesting site for storks. The smaller finds are exhibited in a large museum worth visiting. Among them are several impressive statues and mosaics. From Merida, it's a good 250 kilometers to the Costa de Luz. I cover the first part to the border of Extremadura in 2 days. The route takes me across wide plains again. These become even more monotonous because I cycle mostly on the N630, which runs parallel to the motorway. This makes cycling easier and faster, but also more boring. On the first day, I cycle as far as Zafra. This small town has an old center that is worth seeing. Part of it dates back to Moorish times. South of Zafra, with the monastery as my destination, I try to avoid the main road. I should have resisted, because the ride turns into a real horror trip. At the beginning, I'm still on surfaced roads, but quite suddenly I end up among the vineyards and sink so deep into the clay that I doubted for a while that I shall ever get going again. Wet and heavy terra rossa had covered all moving parts of my bike, and only with difficulty can I reach solid ground again. I wonder if the vinos de calzadilla are as heavy as the soil they grow on. From Monasterium, a small town just before the border with Andalusia, the landscape becomes more mountainous. Here I enter the Sierra Morena, which forms the southern edge of the Meseta Plateau. Up to Santa Olaya de la Cala, the road is still comparatively flat. But from the impressive 10-towered castle of the small town, I can see that the road thereafter leads directly into the mountains. I spent the night in Zafra. The name of the small town comes from Arabic, and the place is situated like an eagle's nest on an 800-meter high mountain peak. There is a magnificent panoramic view of the surrounding mountains, and I spent the night in a very nice casa rural. But there is a serious drawback. It is Sunday evening, and the only restaurant still open offers no food. Well, what to do? 800 inhabitants, tourist season over. The following day I cycle from Zafra almost to the Atlantic coast. That is about 100 kilometers. Fortunately, it goes more downhill than uphill. First, I reach the mining area Minas de Riotinto. Ores were mined in the Sierra Morena even in pre-Roman times, probably mainly silver. But things really took off in the 19th century, when the English began to mine copper and iron here on a large scale. The mining turned the water of the Riotinto reddish. In the meantime, the mines belong to the Spanish state, but most of them have been closed down. Like the Ruhr district, or Manchester and Liverpool, the Minas de Riotinto are ancient football land. Football was played here for the very first time in Spain. South of Minas de Riotinto, I cycle out of the mountains and onto the coastal plain. From the small town of Valverde del Camino, I follow a railway cycle path for the third time in Spain. It is the Via Verde Los Molinos de Agua, the path of the watermills. I don't see any watermills, but the path is well maintained, which I appreciate as I reach my destination for the day, Trigueros, pretty exhausted. The next morning I cycle on to Huelva and thus stand on the Atlantic Ocean for the first time again after cycling 1,200 kilometers through the interior of Spain. Huelva has hardly any sights to offer. It is a port city with a lot of chemical industry. I cycle through plenty of that on my way to the Columbus Monument, which stands near the southern edge of the city. It is a gift from the United States to the Spanish people. The American sculptor Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney created it. From here, I want to cycle directly to Punta Umbria via the Puente de Santa Eulalia. The Spanish bureaucracy prevents this by suddenly closing the 4-kilometer-long bridge, 2/3 of which I have already crossed for construction work. I have to cycle back and just manage to avoid being completely locked in. Well, it's mainly Spanish tourists who are supposed to come to this region, so the others are welcome to take a diversion of a good 20 kilometers. I spent 3 days on the Costa de Luz, one in Punta Umbria and 2 more in Islantilla, 30 kilometers to the west. In Punta Umbria, I stay in a small hotel in the middle of the old town. In Islantilla, I am in a real tourist fortress. The Hotel Ilunion Islantilla with very spacious rooms, a large balcony and a huge pool. There are only few foreign tourists on the Costa de Luz. Almost only Spaniards go on holiday here. Now, at the end of September, it's mainly groups of pensioners which come here to soak up the sun. Apart from eating, shopping, lying by the pool and walking up and down the beach, there's really nothing much to do. But that seems to be enough for most visitors. At lunchtime, it's only about 25 degrees, but you can enjoy a late Spanish dinner outside without any problems. If you have an un-Spanish early dinner, maybe even during a great sunset. The pleasantly warm but not too hot temperatures make cycling a pleasure as I set off west towards the Portuguese border. The border here is formed by the Rio Guadiana. And from Ayamonte I have to take a ferry to the other bank. The nearby motor bridge is closed to cyclists. Once I have reached the other side of the Portuguese border town of Villarreal de Santo Antonio, I immediately notice a Spanish-Portuguese common feature. The signposts for the EuroVelo one are there, but the cycle paths are not. Or rather, they are there virtually, because there are certainly some commode coordinates. But in reality, there is nothing. But there are also a few obvious differences between Spain and Portugal. Firstly, in Portugal at least 70% of the tourists are not Portuguese, but English, German, Dutch or Spanish. Secondly, Almost all employees in the tourism sector speak English quite well, which was often only marginally present in Spain, even in large hotels. And thirdly, guests who come as single persons for dinner are no longer regarded, as in Spain, as distressed Martians. That is a real relief. The cycle path leads along the N125 in the direction of Tavira. The road is wide and has almost no gradients, but there are an unpleasant number of cars. In percentage terms, Portugal has almost twice as many traffic fatalities as Germany. With this in mind, after a few kilometers, I make my way into the hilly country to the north. Here, the roads go up and down quite a bit, but there's little traffic and the cycling is much more pleasant. In Tavira, I spent the night in the Residencial Mares, directly on the Guilao riverfront. Then I treat myself to an Indian dinner and walk along the river into the beautiful old town. Finally, I attend a Fado concert in the Igreja da Misericordia. With overnight stays in Albufeira, Portimao and Lagos, I am now very gradually approaching the southwestern tip of Europe. Although it is early October, the days are summery warm and the sky is a deep Mediterranean blue. Even with the climbs, cycling is a pleasure. Even after Tavira, I stay inland for the time being and don't take the busy N125, which the EuroVelo One website suggests. I bypass Faro and instead visit Lule with its castle in the city center, and the nearby ruins of a Roman villa in Villamura. From Albufeira, I cycle close to the coast, but that's no use because the hills follow me. Either way, there is no cycle path, and if I don't want to use the busy N125, I often have to make my way along small and winding side roads. But one can spend a lot of time with beautiful views over the cliffs of the Algarve. Now in October, when the summer over-tourism is past, it presents itself in all its splendor. A highlight is the Ponta Pietade near Lagos. The cliffs dazzle with bizarre formations of yellow and reddish-brown limestone and sandstone and many small bays. Lagos, I set off on my last stage to the far southwest of Europe. From here, it's only about 40 kilometers to Sagres and the Cabo de São Vicente. I can avoid the N125 for most of the way, but as compensation, there are sometimes gradients of up to 20%. The landscape is arid but at the same time beautiful. There are villages where, apparently, more English people live than Portuguese. In some small grocery shops, you can even find the Daily Mail. I hope the anti-European tabloid is only used to light the fireplace. From the Forte de Almadena, built on top of an older fortress to ward off pirates, I catch my first glimpse of Sagres, still 20 kilometers away. I cheerfully tackle the last few kilometers. From Vila do Bispo, it is even possible to cycle on a small side road that is completely car-free. It would be really nice to experience this more often on the EuroVelo one. Sagres has the air of a place where all roads end, even if the Cabo lies still some 6 kilometers further. But although only about 2,000 inhabitants live here, there's a lot going on even in the off-season. Since the turn of the millennium, the place has remained very popular with surfers, and many hotels and restaurants have been added. Sagres and its fortress, the Fortaleza de Sagres, were founded by Henry the Navigator, but the claim that he built a special maritime academy here belongs to the realm of legend. What is certain, however, is that Henry the Navigator died in Sagres in 1460. The fortress, which lies on a rocky outcrop in the very south of the town, essentially consists of a broad protective wall on the landward side. Inside, attempts are currently being made to build a new museum. So far, the buildings are still drab, but one can overlook this because of the magnificent surroundings. From Sagres, it is another 6 kilometers to the extreme southwestern tip of the European continent. The Cape was already a sacred place for Phoenicians, Greeks and Romans. Today, the strongest lighthouse in Europe stands on the promontory of the Cabo de São Vicente. There are also the usual sausage stalls and souvenir shops, but even they cannot take away the magic of the place. Until about 10 years ago, EuroVelo 1 ended here, and it's hard to imagine a more worthy conclusion. On my cycling tour, I not only crossed awesome landscapes, but also many borders, including some, such as that between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, that were carved in blood. At none of these, really none, did I have to show my passport or papers. I met Germans who had made a new home for themselves in northern Norway. Englishmen who were living out their retirement on the Algarve, and Spaniards who had grown up in the Ruhr district. The shadows of the earlier centuries still lurk around every corner. We should not underestimate them, but the Europe of the future will leave them behind.